Rich with Experiences is a podcast of amazing people who shares their real-life lived experiences of adversity, strength, and courage in hopes to help someone who can relate. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and follow us on all major streaming platforms: Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and YouTube. And welcome to this week's episode of Rich with Experiences. My name is Michelle. I am your host. I am the owner and founder of Life After Loss Academy. I am a trauma-informed life coach, also a health coach as well. And at Life After Loss Academy, we created a program called Healing to Create Abundance. We have a self-led program, a group program, and also one-on-one program. That's what I do. But here at Rich with Experiences, I really built this platform to share what we go through our lives and how our experiences can impact and help someone else who might be going through that. So this week, the message is no different. In fact, I am going to share a story that really has impacted me, and it didn't dawn on me until this morning when I was kind of getting things ready for this show. And I kind of had an idea that I wanted to speak on this because I'm hearing a lot of this topic, and I tried to speak on it a little while ago, but we're going to speak on it today. And the topic that I'm going to share, not the topic, I should say the experience that I'm going to share for me is how people pleasing, how it showed up in my life and how that trauma response landed me in jail. So, and the reason why that's important is right now currently marks my 10th anniversary of when this happened to me. So it's really special to look at your life and kind of reflect and have that moment to really congratulate yourself, because we don't do it. And I'm speaking for myself. And if you're someone that also kind of falls along in this category of finding the negative things first and kind of looking at our challenges and leaning on our challenges and not taking the time to reflect and look at what came out of that moment and what did we learn about ourselves. And so when I was looking at people pleasing and how it showed up in my life in a response, this part of my life, this chapter, these 10 years of my life has literally been one of the biggest and hardest hurdles that I have had to go through in my life. And so I wanted to share that in hopes that hopefully it'll help someone else who might be going through something similar. So I struggled with people pleasing as a response because I didn't really have the ability to articulate and take what I was feeling inside and be able to speak it and voice it in a way where I felt that I had that value. Okay. I always was afraid of inconveniencing someone, angering someone, upsetting someone by what I thought, what I felt. And so because of that fear, because of how I was raised, it showed up in how I was able to advocate for myself or lack thereof. Right. So this situation, I never really thought about how people pleasing showed up in this moment and during this time when I was going through it. But in 2015, my husband and we lived in a different state. I was the one working. We had 3 children. I was the sole worker. He stayed home with my youngest one because they were super, super young. So we would have to put them in childcare. And childcare was just so expensive. We're literally working to pay for childcare because it was just too much. So we decided that someone was going to stay home. And my husband at the time was helping my father, who was very sick. That was one of the main reasons why we moved back to the state that I'm originally from, was for my husband to help my father. So during this time, we lived paycheck to paycheck. We didn't have a savings account. We didn't have the financial means. Now, granted, my parents were very, very helpful. Whenever we had a financial problem, my husband would often go to my parents and they would help us. But I just didn't know how. I felt like, man, if I went and asked my parents for help after my husband did, then it's kind of like double dipping. I'm really exhausting this resource. I know my parents, like my mom was working as well. My dad is struggled from a stroke, and so many people had utilized my parents for resources and never really paid them back. And so I really felt like, man, I can't ask my parents for help. And when an unexpected bill came up and we couldn't pay it, I was doing that thing that we typically do. I was taking from this pot to pay this pot, taking from this place and putting money over here. And I didn't have the financial means to cover and put all the money that I was taking and shifting and not paying over here. And it didn't work. And we often know now that doing something like that doesn't work. But that's where I found myself at. Can anyone relate? We can't help. Well, at that time, I couldn't help the fact that something happened, but I certainly blamed myself in that moment. I blamed myself for not being prepared. I blamed myself for the thing happening. I blamed myself for just absolutely, when the sun came up, I blamed myself. So what I did was I just tried to like, oh my, I just have to figure this out. I have to get ourselves out of this situation. So what I did was I made a decision, and I took money to pay for my bills. I took money that did not belong to me and I paid for the bills that I had. Now, that decision wasn't an easy decision for me. And I struggled with that decision because one of the things that aligned with me as a person was my integrity. And in that moment, I was not in alignment with what I connected with myself, who I was, and how I showed up. So in that moment, when I made that decision, I was like, the guilt started. The guilt started. I remember the day that I got in trouble. It was 2014, the day after Christmas. I was arrested for what happened. And I remember sitting there. And even though that I made the decision because I was trying to get myself out of a situation, I knew that that decision that I made was wrong. And I knew that I wanted to take accountability for it. But I struggled with allowing myself to stand up and speak, especially in moments where my family and people who I was afraid of how they were going to respond, that fear stopped me from doing a lot of things. So when I got in trouble, I got out on bond, and I was devastated. I remember coming back home. I isolated myself from my family. They were upset with me because they were calling and I just couldn't um, answer the phone. I had a 3-story home, and I was so in fear that I would sit in the stairwell away from windows so no one could see me, because one, I felt so guilty because I did something that wasn't aligned with my true self. I was fearful of what could happen because my picture was on the news and everyone saw me. I was so fearful of my environment. Um, I felt like people were coming towards me with pitchforks, and I felt like I was literally the smallest person on the planet, and including my family. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted to know what to do, what I did. Everyone just really was coming at me from all angles, and I just didn't know what to say or how to even show up for myself. I remember in this moment really trying to lean on my husband. I'm like, you know what, you're gonna have to help me through this. I don't know. And a lot of the decisions that were made were not the best decisions, right? And I didn't realize at the time. Well, actually, no, I'm going to take that back. I did realize at the time that some of the decisions that my husband was making wasn't the best decision, but I didn't have the strength in me at the time to say, no, we're not going to do this. So what we decided to do, I was out on bond, and I remember this. I didn't have a job. He didn't have a job. And so we decided to just sell everything. We sold everything, and we moved back to the state that we moved from. So we moved back, but remind you, I was on bond. And so here was another decision that we should not have been making, but we did it out of fear. I did so many decisions that wasn't aligned because I felt guilty. I felt afraid. I felt that, okay, well, he has ideas, so we're going to right this wrong. So we moved back to the state that we moved from. During this time, we got our kids back in school. I started working again. Um, and my husband was also looking for work, and we stayed at family members' homes. Something in my spirit just didn't sit well. And it was as if every day I woke up, I was looking for the other like the page to turn. I was waiting and I was looking and I was anticipating this accountability to come, and it did. This time though, my spirit was in different alignment. I knew that I couldn't run, and I knew that deep down inside that I wanted to hold myself accountable. I knew that it was the right thing to do, and instead of allowing other people's opinions, other people's ideas, other people will let me do it this way, or that's not that big of a deal. And I've seen this happen and we can do this. And instead of just allowing all of those judgments come in and all of those ideas that weren't aligned with how I wanted to handle it, I decided to just really say, you know what? We're just going to have to deal with this. I got a phone call and I had to go, and they told me that I needed to fill out some paperwork. And that was it. I knew it wasn't it. I was hoping that it would be it, but something told me that that wasn't going to be it. But one thing I did know is that I was going to really do what I felt truly that I needed to do. So I went to the police station. We signed the paperwork. And of course, at that time, they arrested me because of the charges that were pending from the other state. And during this time, it was up to the other state if they wanted to come and extradite me back to the state for these charges. I was scared. I was scared, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I knew that my faith, and I knew that walking in this accountability was going to be tough, but I knew it was something that I had to do. I had to hold myself accountable. But what I was struggling with, it would really come to pass when I was sitting in jail. So all of my life up until this point, I actively worked in my community. I served in my church. I really was trying, and it really aligns it within my spirit, is to show up in my community as a representation. I never aspired to do something like this. And I was beating myself up because I'm like, how did you make this decision? You know, one, it was a terrible decision to do what you did, but on top of that, and I was sitting there saying, and on top of that, you did this, and on top of that, you did that. And every decision, every thought that I had about this situation was nothing but beating myself up. Right. And I remember sitting in jail in the darkest place ever. And I was sitting there and it was so quiet. And one thing that I constantly thought about was like, man, Michelle, you always inspired to empower and uplift. And here you are making decisions. And I realized in that moment what I was struggling with. This thing that I connected my identity to. I felt that the way that I showed up and how I served my community, I felt that that's who I was. And so I felt that because I made this decision that that was going to dim my light, that was going to change the projection of who I was. People were not going to look at me as that person. And so as I sat there in that cell, it hit me hard. It was like that fall from grace that I put myself on that pedestal. The grace that was falling was this idea that I imposed in my own mind. Nobody told me. And I'm sitting there just like, oh my gosh, devastated that I've let so many people down because they were obviously more important than the real person that I let down was within myself. But as I was sitting here feeling the lowest about myself, miraculously, people saw this light that I thought was no longer burning. I was sitting in this jail cell and people would come to me and just say they were interested in who I was. They noticed that I was a little bit different. And as they sat and told me their stories, they also said something to me that they didn't even realize that I was struggling with in that moment. Was they referred to me often about this light that they saw in me, and how when they were in my presence, they just felt this comfort. In hindsight, being 2020, they didn't realize that that message that they were giving me was the most important, because I was sitting there feeling as if I lost that purpose, because I thought that that decision that I made erased all of that. So when I was in jail, my husband worked ferociously to figure out how to get me bonded out again. So this is the second time. This bond was even higher than the first one, because of the fact that I left one state to another. So the chances of someone actually saying, you know what, I trust this person because of who you are, because I know your spirit, I know your soul. And I was like, this isn't going to happen. And thankfully, I was incorrect. Someone believed in me. Someone knew who I was. Someone saw the spirit, but someone also realized that sometimes you just got to be there. And what they did was they got me out of that situation. There was another bond. They put up their home in collateral. And I was so grateful. I was so grateful. But then something happened. When I was in jail, my family didn't know that I was back in jail. And so when I got out of jail, my phone, I had so many phone calls, so many missed phone calls. And so finally I looked at it, and it was a message from my sister telling me how ill my father was, and that they were really angry because they didn't know that I was in jail. So what they assumed was I was just trying to avoid them, because that's what I was doing before I left. I was avoiding my family because I didn't know how to take my head out of my shell and just really walk in the situation. And so they were really angry because they thought I was just ignoring them. But the whole time I was in jail, I didn't know, I didn't have my phone. So when I heard that my father was sick, and he was sicker, and that he was actually in a coma for, I think I was sitting until, I think I was there for maybe a week. But while I was locked up for that week, my dad was in a coma. So when I got out, I know my husband was like, "What are you going to do?" Many people thought I was going to go home. I was really close with my dad. My dad is my stepfather. I speak often about my dad. He is my biological father's best friend. He met my mom when he was 19. He had no biological children of his own, and he stepped up and he raised me as his child. We were very, very close. And so when he passed away, there was a lot of speculation. People thought I was going to flee and go back home. But I think it was the night that I got out of jail. I remember it was a few nights after I got out of jail. I remember being on the phone with my dad. My dad woke up from his coma for a short period of time, and I was able to speak to my dad, and I heard my dad's voice. And my dad told me that he loved me before he passed away. So I was able to have this level of closure. And I think, and I, not that I think, I know that that level of closure I needed in order to do what I needed to do next. So my dad passed away while I was out on bond. And I had to make a decision. A lot of people thought I was going to go home. I didn't go home. And the reason why was there was no way that I could go and risk someone who gave, someone who believed, someone who risked it all so I can be with my kids. I couldn't put them in a position to where they would risk everything with their kids when they risked it all for me to even be with my kids. And I was okay with where I sat with how I was able to say goodbye to my dad. I was okay with that. Um, but it was hard. But it was in that moment when I was convicted. I was like, no, I am not leaving. I have allowed other decisions to be made because I couldn't stand up. I couldn't articulate. I couldn't be like, no, I'm not going to do this. I kind of allowed the situation to get ahead of me, and other people were making decisions that impacted me, and I felt very numb in the moment. But this time it was very, very clear I was not going to go home. um I remember during this time, my father did pass away. I was still going to my court cases. And then there was one particular time, um, you know how when you just get that feeling, you know something is up, you don't really know what's up, but you know, and you have this feeling. That's what happened. I remember I was sitting and eating dinner with my husband's nephew, and we were eating Chinese food, and we opened up our fortune cookies. There was a fortune in his, but there was not in mine. And I knew, I said, okay, it was time. The next court case, I went to court, said hi to everyone. That's just my personality, right? And sure enough, the state that I left from decided that they are going to come and get me, even though a lot of people thought they were not going to actually come and get me, especially because of the crime being so low value. They're like, oh no, they're not. And I believed it. I thought, I kind of wanted to have faith that that might be an option for me. Like, oh no, they're not going to think about me. But that was wrong. They did. And they actually did come up from California to Washington to come and take me back to California. And I walked into that situation feeling differently. I was scared. I was so scared. But for the first time, I knew what I was doing was right. I knew I was making the right decision. I knew that I was walking in my alignment. I knew that I was finally being my authentic self. And I did it knowing that there was going to be cost. And I was okay with that. I was okay with that. So I sat there. It was really fast. Next morning, they were there to take me back to California. And it just so happened to be someone, and it's weird. It's the irony is so weird how the universe works. But the detective and the police officer who came and got me actually went to high school with my brother. That's a small town it is. So we're sitting in the car and they're making small talk with me. I had no desire to have any conversations, but they're making small talk with me. They're asking, you know, how's your family, this and that. And I'm just sitting, just like, I don't care. I don't care, right? I just want to get this done. And all the while I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, girl, I cannot believe this is your life. I cannot believe that we are in this situation. I cannot believe this. There has to be a reason. There has to be a reason. There has to be a reason, right? Because it's what when we go into these moments and we're just like, what is the reason? I need to hold on to something. I need to hold on to something. And we finally get to the city where they're dropping me off and they're doing the intake and getting me transferred over. And the person who was the detective, he was standing there and he was looking at me and he said, you know, you shocked me. And at this point, I didn't care about how I shocked him, but I was kind of curious about what he meant because now we're sitting. I just spent all of this time in this car with you, sir. What did I do now that shocked you? Right. And he said, you know, I I heard your dad died. And I'm sitting here like, how the heck did he know my dad died? Right. And he said, you know, we were sitting there anticipating you coming home and we were going to lock you up then. He said, but you didn't come. Why? And I told him, I said, I couldn't risk doing this. I couldn't risk someone else losing because of my actions. And he was shocked by the answer because I did something that was different than what they anticipated. So they anticipated because in the past, I was doing some, I was doing I was making decisions that were not of my own. I was pleasing people. I was allowing other people's way of thinking that might have made sense to them be the way that I was thinking. And it didn't make sense to me. It wasn't aligned with the way that I wanted to walk, the way that I wanted people to see not only me, but the way that I wanted to see myself. So, of course, the actions of how I was moving and what I'm doing now, it looks different and it's shocking because I am now standing in my purpose. I now realize that I'm not going to do that. But I wish I can say that it was that simple. Remember, this is my 10-year
I don't want to say anniversary, but this is 10 years of reflection. See, when that happened that day, when I went back and I settled it to the system, it was this big ordeal that was just for a misdemeanor, extradition, bonds, a lot of bonds for something that was a misdemeanor. There was a lot of talk like, why are we doing this? It's so minuscule. It wasn't minuscule for me. It was a lot of heavy decisions, heavy consequences that had lasting impact in my life. Yes, the financial aspect of it was squared away and made whole. But the impact of what it did to me was something that I struggled with for many years after. And that is what really sparked this business, this journey, me creating Life After Loss Academy, because I was so stuck on that guilt. And guilt is so low vibrational. I know we often hear people talk about vibrations and low vibrational. Guilt is one of the lowest vibrational frequencies. And if we believe in vibrational frequencies, we understand the power of law, the law of attraction. What we put out is what we get. So what I was doing, because in that moment, yes, I made a decision that was aligned with myself. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to miss that opportunity because I'm not going to take from someone who gave so graciously to me. I'm not going to do that. But that only lasted in that moment. What happened after that was so many years of guilt. I guilted myself because I was stuck on this idea that, oh, you have to be perfect. You have to be this pillar. This mistake, you just, how did you allow this mistake to happen? You should have known. You should have had it. I went through all of these shouldas. Why are you still stuck in this people pleasing? Why didn't you just say yes? You could have just, because a lot of people say, well, you could have done it this way. Why didn't you just say no? We look at our relationships and we look at when we are people pleasing and when we are disassociating, when we do have that trauma response, we look at why did we respond in that way? But what we have to do, and what I want you to encourage yourself to do, is the thing that I learned 10 years out, is to give yourself grace. When you know that guilt, when you're feeling guilty, you're in a low vibration. Your frequency is that of low vibrational frequency. And what do you need to do in that? When you're starting to feel guilty, then you need to think immediately, hone into something that's going to change it. Okay, I wish if I could tell myself back then, in those moments when I felt like I should have known, I should have made a better decision. I wish I would have told myself, you only knew and you only know how to do what you know how to do. You are only able to process what you're able to process. Our capacity is only as large as what we're able to handle. Okay. And in that moment, and when I look back and I reflect on the 10 years, I did the best I knew how. And I showed up the best that I knew how to for myself. And most importantly, the thing that I felt the most guilty about was I'm not going to be able to show up in the way that I can inspire, uplift, and encourage my community was a bold-faced lie. See, that was the BS. That was the lie between the BS. See, the lie that I cannot encourage people because I lived through an experience was really ingrained from my early childhood. And that was something that I had to work on. And that's what I want you to do as well. I want to encourage you that when you are sitting there, when you are, especially if you're in a people pleasing situation where you're making decisions like myself in this story, where it was hard for me to connect and be able to articulate what I really wanted. Remember your why. And sometimes in this situation, like when I look back, and even now as I'm thinking about it, I literally in that moment made the decision to not come back because it was the right thing to do. I wasn't thinking about my morals. I wasn't thinking about uh, 10 years from now. I wasn't thinking about, well, actually, let me correct that. I was thinking about my morals. I wasn't thinking about it aligning of what this thing called alignment is. I wasn't thinking about being my authentic self. I wasn't thinking about trauma responses. I wasn't thinking about freeze, fight, flight. I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know how all of those things matter, how our belief systems matter in our perception of reality. I didn't know any of that. And if I would have known that then, I would have been able to handle situations a lot differently. But I'm grateful and thankful for those opportunities because it showed me, made me realize that we are not our mistakes. One, our mistakes makes us who we are today, especially when we use them to be compasses and guide us to where we need to be, what we need to know, where we need to go, where we need to grow, right? Allow that to be the beacon of light for you. I sat in guilt for so long. I didn't volunteer in communities. I didn't put my foot forward. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be heard, all because I felt guilty because I thought that this decision I made diminished my light and prevented me from being this person that you cannot change who you are authentically meant to be. But sometimes we get off the beaten path. And oftentimes our trauma response, how we turn up, how we show up, when it's not in alignment, might be a response. Ask yourself, how am I feeling? Check in with yourself. What is this emotion that I am feeling? And reminding ourselves that emotions is energy in motion. What do I need to tap into? And then work from there. Our decisions in life sometimes are impacted by our experiences. And we have to be kind to ourselves. We have to be loving to ourselves. We have to extend the courtesy and compassion that we would give to people we don't know to ourselves, especially when we make mistakes. We can tell everyone all day long, you made a mistake. It's okay. You learn from it. Apply it to ourselves. What do we learn from this mistake? What are we hoping to apply differently the next time it comes up? I tell you, the next time when I have a financial problem, right? I understand that that method isn't something that's wise. I do things differently now. And I also give myself grace, love, and compassion. And I want you to give yourself grace, love, and compassion. Because loving yourself to discovery and healing is so key. Understanding that a lot of the way that we view the world, our beliefs, comes from a lot of our responses that we developed from 0 to 6. And to be loving with ourselves when we are learning and seeing that we are doing things differently and we want to do things differently. We want to learn how to do things differently. And we want to put that back into ourselves. It feels so amazing. Second thing, learning how to start healing, going inward, aligning in the right way, feeling our emotions and not being afraid. There were so many times when I just felt afraid to just feel the disappointment because I didn't know what was next. If I felt that angry in my I didn't know what was next. But when I connected to it, when I allowed myself to go there, that is when I was able to say, oh my goodness, Michelle, you were fighting this ability to be your authentic self. It had nothing to do with you, baby. It was because you didn't understand what you didn't know. But it was that awareness. It was me getting into this nervous system, going through, feeling it, going to my subconscious, creating a safe space, meditating, journaling. It was all of these tools that allowed me to get to that point. And most importantly, understanding what grieving is. It's more than just losing someone in the physical realm. You grieve so much in your life, and grieving is just the emotional response to losing something that you love. So when you're grieving, I spent so much time, even though I made that decision, that right decision to not flee, to not jump bond, to stay in jail, there were so many years I was stuck in that guilt. There were so many years I was stuck in that anger. There were so many years I was stuck in that depression. And nobody told me and explained to me that, you know what, these are stages of grief. You are grieving this idea that you had about yourself. And you're saying this person doesn't exist. So now you're going through that. No one shared that with me. So I want to share it with you. When you are going through life experiences, when you have not, the relationship that you are envisioning, the marriage that you are envisioning, the relationship at work that you are envisioning, the relationship within yourself that you are envisioning isn't working out, okay. Connect. You will find out so much about yourself in retrospect. So now that I'm 10 years out, that's really what I wanted to share. Because I talk about reflecting, awareness, and really allowing yourself to feel it. And this time, I'm able to say that I am proud. I am proud of everyone that tunes in to Rich with Experiences. I am so proud of everyone that has joined the show and shared about their experiences in life that really molded the person to who they are today. I wouldn't be the person I am today without this experience. And for so many years, I tried to avoid it. For so many years, I didn't see the beauty of it. For so many years, I ran from it. But the truth of the matter is, without that experience, Life After Loss Academy wouldn't exist. Because it was through all of those experiences that it made me realize I needed to really hone in. I needed to just figure out how to love myself, how to align with myself, how to put my feelings first. So I hope my story has really inspired light if you're struggling in areas where it's hard to realize and separate that you are not your mistakes or decisions that you felt were not in alignment with your better judgment. That just because those um, lived experiences happen doesn't mean that that's who you are. We have the ability to take what we need from the experience, take the lessons, apply the lessons, and create healthy boundaries around the things that we find no longer serves us. In my story, I took what I needed to help me in this journey, and I definitely created boundaries to where I know that I'm not going to fall back on, because we need to take the lesson, but we definitely need to take the great experiences that we get from it, because those experiences, that's where the richness is. And that is why we are rich with experiences, because we want to take those lived experiences and create abundance out of them. So thank you so much for being here with me every week. And I hope that this story, that my story has encouraged you to just really find that thing. Remember, you are worth it. Remember to love yourself through discovery and healing. And if you want to work with me, or if you are curious about the programs that I offer, please go to my website. If you are looking and watching at winwinwomen.tv, we have a lovely bio portion. All of my links in the bio are there. You can go to my Calendly. You can select to do an encouragement call. So we will sit one-on-one. You will tell me what I can help work with you with. And we will also have an opportunity where I will show you the program to make sure it's a good fit for you. So I'm getting ready to release the self-guided portion. And that is going to be amazing. That is going to be a program where it's a work at your own pace. So it's a one-time payment offer. You work at your own pace. It is going to be a little bit more condensed. So it's not as hardcore as the group or one-on-one. It's not as intensive, but it will definitely help you build a great foundation. And there is a workbook that goes along with it that is designed to allow you to work at your pace. Remember that when you are doing this healing work, to be kind with yourself. If you feel yourself getting anxious and you're like, okay, this is the capacity where I can do that. Right? If you're doing journaling and if you're feeling yourself getting really emotional and that's the top that you can go, you have reached your emotional tank at that moment, allow it to be that. Okay. So thank you. It was an amazing, amazing show. I'm always so thankful to be here with you guys. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.